Hello everyone, welcome to our presentation on Children Rent a Car Gopi Clendening. This case was decided by the Court of Appeal in 1978 and focuses on the enforceability of collision clauses in rental agreements. My name is Loprit Kaur and I will start the presentation by introducing the key facts and legal issues. Let's begin. Now let's discuss the key facts of this case. Glending rented a car from Tilton Rent a Car, signing an agreement that included an exemption clause stating that he would be fully responsible for damages if he violated any law. Later, Glending got into an accident and argued that he was not aware of the exclusion clause and that it was unfair. However, Tilde Rent-A-Car insists that he was bound by the contract and had to pay for damages. This case raised three major legal issues. First, whether exemption clauses could be used to protect business even in cases of negligence. Second, whether this specific clause was unreasonable, making it unenforceable. And third, whether Clendening was legally obligated by the contract that he did not fully understand. The court had to decide whether Tilde Rent-A-Car could enforce the coalition clause or if Clendening was unfairly trapped by the terms of the agreement. Next, we will examine how the court ruled on these issues and the impact of this case on contract law. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Lapri Singh. I'm from group number C. Today I'm talking about slide 3 and 4. Firstly, there is a first point, central legal issues. So firstly, we note about what is legal issues. Legal issues are the challenges or dispute raising within the framework of laws, regulations impacting individual businesses or government. They require interpretation or resolution through legal system and play a critical role maintaining order and justice in the society. There is a point showing liability under rental agreements. If the defendant broke the rental agreement, may Tilden rent a car enforce a responsibility clause. There are some clauses like if the contract's exception were unjustified or unethical, and if they ought to be upheld. Next point is unenforceability of conditions, the validity of standard from contract, and whether the defendant was bounded by potentially unfair or imprecise conditions. There are clauses, definitions, exemption, limit or exclude parties' liability in certain situations. In a Tilden rent cooperative lending, Tilden invoked exclusionary clauses to shield itself from liability for damages if the car was used inappropriately, such as unlawful purposes. The relevance says, considering the fact of the case, the court assessed whether these clauses were unenforceable or rational. So the company shows there are some cases in that point. Thanks so much.
Hi everyone, my name is Mahichan Singh and I am presenting the court's view of exceptional clauses. The court examined the enforceability of the rental agreement's exemption terms. They examined whether the provisions were reasonable, unambiguous, and free from oppression or injustice. The court ruled that an exceptional clause could be declared unlawful if rational or irrelevant to the contract. Uh, this case established that exemption provisions are acceptable unless they are unreasonable or unfair in the circumstances. The court considered the condition to be reasonable because they were related to the nature of rental business and important for managing insurance risks. The role of unreasonable in the case. Contract law unreasonability terms that too harsh or unfair are referred to as unreasonable in contract law. If a phase is overly one-sided or does not reflect the objectives of the party, it may be deemed unreasonable. Uh, After considering whether the exceptional clause were irrational, the court concluded that they weren't. The opinion of Lord Denning, the court maintained that the terms in this case were not so unreasonable as to amount to fraud. Despite his frequent emphasis on fairness, final decision because the exceptional clause did not unfairly alter the terms of contract, the court determined that they were enforceable. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Lopez Singh and I'm a member of Group C. Today we will delve into the influential contributions of Lord Dennings in shaping modern contract law, specifically focusing on his views regarding exemption clauses and the fairness of the contract term. We will look at the relevant precedents, cases, and how Dennings' ideas affected landmark ruling such as Title Rent a Car. Let's begin with slide 7, which outlines the key precedents and case law. Lord Denning's opinion in the Jacques case is particularly important. He asserted that exemption provisions in contracts could be unlawful if they were deemed excessive or oppressive. Ding stance emphasized the need for fairness and the balance of the power in contractual agreements. His reasoning here laid the groundwork for future case law and offered a broader view of contract law, once that considered the interests of both parties, not just the one in the superior position. In the Grimsby brother case, Lenin discussed the idea of unconstitutability, a term that denotes the enforcement of contract clauses that are so unjust that they go against public policy. The idea would later become crucial in determining whether certain contract terms could be considered unenforceable. Denning's work were a clarion call for equity in contracts, arguing courts to scrutinize clauses that could be deemed oppressive or unfair. These concepts that had a direct effect on the case of Taylor rent a car and influential decision in the realm of exemption clauses, while the exemption clauses in Taylor rent a car were not ultimately overturned. It's clear that the court was heavily influenced by the involving Jesuit thoughts, particularly Dennings. Though the clauses were upheld, the case highlights the shifting view towards unfair and harsh provision in contracts. Now moving to slide 8, Lord Denning's overall influence on contract law cannot be overstated. His arguments for unreasonableness and unconstitutionalness had a long-lasting impact. Denning firmly believed that harsh, unjust terms should be declared unconstitutional, pushing for a more equitable approach to interrupting contracts. His thinking approach to interrupting contracts. His thinking resonated in several cases that followed, creating a precedent that would ensure the protection of parties from unfair contract terms. When looking at Titanic car through the lens of Denning's influence, we see how contract law began evolving despite the court decision to uphold the exemption clause in Turner. Denning's approach to awareness and security of the harsh clause created a space for more careful exemption of such terms in future cases. This shift was essential in developing the principles we rely on today ensure fairness in contract law. Thank you so much.
Hi there, my name is Akashdeep Singh. I am from Group C. Today I am going to represent the defendant's liability in exemption clauses of the case Children Rent a Car Company versus Clarendon 1978. Exemption clauses play a crucial role in contract law, particularly when businesses attempt to limit or exclude liability through contractual terms. These clauses significantly impact both businesses and consumers by determining the fairness and enforceability of agreements. One landmark case that shaped this legal principle is Children Rent a Car Company versus Clarendon 1978, which established key guidelines regarding exemption clauses and consumer rights. Case background. The case involved Mr. Clanding, a customer who rent a car from Children Rent a Car. The rental agreement contained an exemption clause that sought to limit the company's liability for damages under specific conditions. However, Mr. Clanding was not adequately informed about this clause and did not fully read the contract before signing. When an accident occurred, the rental company attempted to enforce the clause to deny responsibility for damages. The legal principles established were that the court ruled in favor of Mr. Clanding, emphasizing several fundamental principles. Number one, reasonable notice requirement. Businesses must take reasonable steps to ensure that customers are aware of significant or unusual terms in a contract. An exemption clause is not automatically valid if the customer is not properly informed. And secondly, inequality in bargaining power. Standard forms contracts often leave consumers with little room for negotiation. Courts recognize this power imbalance and carefully examine exemption clauses to prevent businesses from taking unfair advantage of consumers. And third one is that good faith and fair dealing. Contracts should be executed in good faith. If businesses use complex legal language or obscure key terms, courts may refuse to enforce those clauses on fairness grounds. And the influence on contract law is that the ruling in Tilden Rent a Car Company versus Clanding set an important precedent by reinforcing that businesses cannot rely solely on the inclusion of an exemption clause to escape liability, and contractual terms must be communicated clearly and transparently to consumers. Courts have the authority to protect consumers from unfair contract terms that lack proper disclosure. And the conclusion is that the Tilden case remains a cornerstone in contract law, ensuring that exemption clauses are applied fairly and do not exploit consumers. This decision continues to shape modern legal frameworks, promoting transparency and fairness in contractual dealings while safeguarding consumer rights against hidden or misleading terms. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mandeep Singh. I am a member of Group C. Today I am talking about final thoughts, important lesson learned from the case. The court ruled that the exemption clauses in a Tilden rent-a-car rental agreement were valid because were clear and reasonable. As a result of, Tilden was not held responsible when the customer broke the contract. This case highlights the importance of the well-written and fair terms, so especially in industries like car rentals. While businesses can use such clauses to reduce their liability, they must be fair and not misleading. The ruling also enforces that courts will uphold clear contract terms unless they are found to be unfair and exploitative. So next I'm talking about question and discussion. We now invite you to share any question or thoughts about this case. So do you think exemption clauses are fair for customers, or do they give too much power to businesses? So should courts take a more active role in reviewing these clauses to ensure they are fair? It is also important to consider how the clauses affect both customers and companies in a real life situation. So we encourage you to share your views on how these rules should be treated in a contract law. So your insights will help us better understand the case and its impacts. Thank you.